I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, How to Safeguard Your Data Against Cyber Attacks. Today, Rob Villano of CCSI, our Cybersecurity Practice Manager, and Rob Quast, a Principal Technologist with Pure Storage, will be presenting. For those of you not familiar with CCSI, we've been in business since 1974. Our core competencies include infrastructure, so it incorporates the whole data center, whether it's new data center builds around storage solutions, which Rob Q will be discussing today in greater details, virtualization, switching, routing, firewalls, voice over IP, wireless, disaster recovery, video surveillance, and access control. We also offer hardware break-fix maintenance offerings with customized SLAs through our CCSI Net offering. And we have 24/7 application monitoring services, as well as we're a managed service provider, both NOC with our Network Operations Center and SOC with our Security Operations Center through our Threat Protect security offerings. For any questions during today's call, I'd like to introduce you to Catherine Irizarry, and Kat is our webinar host, and just please message them to Kat. Following today's session, a survey will be sent, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. Tell us about the topic, tell us about in the future what you'd like to hear. Your feedback helps us to customize these events towards our customers and prospects, what's of importance to them. And following today's session, so we greatly appreciate your feedback on that. At this moment, I'd like to take this opportunity and introduce you to Rob Villano of CCSI.
Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate that and that information. And welcome, everyone, to How to Safeguard Your Data Against Cyber Attacks. We're really delighted to have Pure Storage, a valued partner with us today, and Rob Quast, Principal Technologist at Pure Storage, to support this webinar. And we'll set an agenda as follows for today. We'll first take a look at who are the threat actors. We'll also look at attacks, tactics, and techniques perpetrated. We'll then turn our attention to technologies to protect your infrastructure and recover your data. Always part of any cybersecurity program or information security program, defense in depth is always key, so we'll take a look at that. We'll establish the importance of creating a data strategy, and we'll look at how a tiered protection architecture works and how specifically Pure implements that sort of architecture. We'll follow up with closing remarks, and we'll answer any questions at the end of today's session. So let's begin. So first and foremost, who are the threat actors? The goal first for these threat actors are theft of confidential information. We're all aware that information is key these days. It can be resold, it can be ransomed against, so on and so forth. So that's the goal, to get at your data, right? And to put you in a position where potentially you have to pay to get it back. But folks who are involved in this kind of area as threat actors are insiders, right? Folks who are already in our companies and may have privileged access to our data. There are drive-by attackers who, unbeknownst to us, may establish a script on a site and we don't know, and we download it and potentially compromise ourselves. Hacktivists are always interesting groups where they're political in nature. They have an agenda and look to achieve their goals by doing cyber criminal work. Those cyber criminals are usually involved in organized crime syndicates. We can think of folks in the Revel Gang, Anonymous, Fancy Bear, who was prime and front and center on the SolarWinds attack. And then there are nation states. These folks appear on the OFAC list, or the Office of Financial Account Control. We can think of Iran, we can think of North Korea, Russia, so on and so forth. But these are the folks who are perpetrating the main attacks out there, things that we see typically from a weekly or monthly basis. And so some of the attacks, tactics, and techniques that come to mind, I think folks are familiar with ransomware these days. Just as a side note, the FBI does not support paying a ransom in response to an attack. There's no guarantee that you'll get your data back, and typically these folks are criminals. Lack of integrity there, so not surprising in that regard. But ransomware clearly is an attempt to hold you hostage for your data. That's why one of the reasons why we established today's webinar. We have some really great solutions and technologies that we'll speak about here, so that you're not in that position. Phishing is always one that's a favorite among cyber criminals or cyber threat actors looking to compromise your endpoint. There are web attacks, as we alluded to earlier. Brute force or a birthday attack is always an interesting one, right? A birthday attack is a probabilistic attack, right? It looks to take advantage of understanding how can you glean a cryptographic hash. And fun fact, if you take 23 people, put them in a room, there's a 50% probability that 2 of them will have the same birthday, not date, but day. You can do that by summing the individual probabilities, 22 over 365 plus 21 over 365, so on and so forth, to arrive at that number. In fact, that number goes to 99.9% of having a similar birthday between 2 people if you have greater than 70 people in that room. So it's not as difficult, you would think, to compromise, okay, or have a collision hash to understand that sort of an attack, right? So just some food for thought there. And then finally, man-in-the-middle attacks are those that, a bad actor positions himself in communication between a user and an application, and they can either eavesdrop or impersonate a party, and they can make it appear as if, a normal exchange of information is underway. So you can see that oftentimes, or might see that oftentimes in Wi-Fi communications, if you have poorly designed networks or an unsecure transmission between 2 parties. So as we transition here, we'll take a look at air gaps. We hear this term a lot, or a concept, and are they effective? Well, we start out with the benefits of an air gap, and it's really just a logical separation typically between our production and backup networks. It's used to isolate critical data from those 2 networks. You can allow it, or it does allow data from those 2 networks, production networks, at regular intervals. That's the drawbridge analogy that you may have heard about. And so there's challenges here with this type of approach. Accessibility typically can be slower. Maintenance may use complex scripting, which is manual in nature. You're not 100% immune to attack when you lower the drawbridge to let data in. And it still doesn't solve internal threats or compromise credentials. You need to be aware of large volume recoveries if you have strict recovery point objectives. And you can't completely address the issues of reliability and speed. And this is particularly where Pure Storage has some great solutions with the FlashBlade technology. So some thoughts there. As we move along, we'll take a look at Pure Storage and Safe Mode. Safe Mode is a concept, registered trademark with Pure. There are benefits, and particularly on secure snapshots. They can't be deleted manually or programmatically. Really important to protect your data. For ransomware mitigation with safeguards modes, safe snapshots, really important concept here as well. An intruder's encrypted volumes can be taken offline, recovered with unchangeable and locked snapshots. So you have the ability to get your data back, and with the use of FlashBlade technology, you can do that in a very quick manner. Enabling safe mode data protection is straightforward, and it comes about by work with your Pure account manager, and you can enable it as well as with CCSI support, and you can establish authorized contacts and record your assigned PIN as well. So we wanted to talk briefly about CCSI and our Pure Storage partnership. We have a close relationship with Pure. We've had success with them. We're using and recognized to be using an industry-leading storage solution, really important in cybersecurity these days. not only for speed of data movement, but also for protection, and that's what we're speaking to here today. We offer pre-implementation planning through our professional services organization. We stand up hardware and will initialize your software with the support of Pure and their support professionals, as well as CCSI help and support. CCSI has been well recognized over the years for network connectivity and SAN implementations. Our team will test management connectivity to your flash array, configure fiber channel and iSCSI requirements, and assist you generally in setting up your replication requirements as well. So a couple of notions here about what we offer on the procurement side from CCSI. We offer New York State OGS contracts as well as GSA. We have OpEx options as well. CCSI is recognized for being a SOC 2 Type 2 certified provider. That just means we provide for the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. We've been recognized with many types of awards over the years, some listed here. We're a member of HIA of Long Island, as well as being recognized for an MSP 500 in 2020. We're happy to support you in any of the implementations that we speak to here. Our differentiators are well recognized. We have on staff security engineers. We conduct risk assessments on your critical assets prior to onboarding to understand your requirements to implement a best-in-breed solution. We also offer custom run books created to meet your expectations, and we offer management, not just monitoring. So it's important to recognize that we partner very closely with you to support the solutions that we're offering. All of our solutions provide a security overlay with a defense in depth strategy for your existing network. And so very quickly, here's our cybersecurity strategy, offering best-in-breed solutions to align with what we call our Threat Protect platform. This is our Managed Security Operations Center, aligned with NIST CSF, the cybersecurity framework. Happy to discuss this with you upon request. With that, I'd like to turn over today's presentation to Rob Quast, Principal Technologist and Pure Storage at Pure Storage. Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Rob. So that was a great example and laying really the ground for what we're going to talk about on the data side, right? So Pure Storage, if you haven't heard of us, we've been around for 10 plus years now, really known for our high performance flash. But over the last couple of years, what we've been doing is scaling out for multiple options. We've been scaling up for even higher performance, then also scaling down in performance, which has really unlocked a lot more use cases. So if you want to just build this one out, when we talk about from a ransomware perspective and in general protection, we talk about in relation to the threat, we want to talk about what kind of problems we're solving. So if we look at how a attack is going to happen, there's this concept of before, during, click nice one, and then after. And if we want to sum this up, before, fundamentally, we're going to be trying to gather as many logs as possible so that you can understand, ideally, identify that you're being attacked, and then also have the ability to go back to that and say, how bad was this attack? And then the during and the after is really about restoring as quickly as possible. And that's really where, not everything needs high performance flash, but when you have that as a resource, well, now you can do a lot more with it, especially from the storage perspective. We go into the next slide, please. If we look specifically at the anatomy of an attack, we have this idea of infiltration, and these would typically start out when the attacker gains access to the environment. You can let it build. When the attacker gains access to the environment, and typically that would be between 50, we used to see upwards to 200 days. If anything, the attackers have been becoming more and more efficient. These are not typically, very technical proficient. Right? Often these are bought as kits on the dark web. These are business people, and they're looking to honestly turn around this as a transaction as quickly as possible so they can move on to the next attack. And then we have the shortly before data is encrypted. And this is really where Pure comes in. We have our snapshot technology. A lot of vendors have snapshot technology. We're going to be talking about what we've done specifically to protect them. And once you get that snapshot, we want to talk about restoring as close to the attack as possible. So that could be things like native array snapshots. That could be copies of those snapshots at other arrays. And that could also be repositories where, for example, like Veeam is backing up to, or Commvault, one of your other backup providers, or native, even with SQL, Oracle, whatnot. The net is, and if we want to just let it build all the way out, when they go to ask for the ransom, we want to identify that point between when it's encryption and when they ask as quickly as possible so that you can, my last click, I think it is, you can restore back right before they've been able to do the encryption. One of the recommendations, this is irregardless of the storage side, is not to power systems down. It's to disconnect the network. We want to be able to identify like what they've been doing. Ransomware will typically run in memory. So once we've restored back to that snapshot, we've eliminated the in-between. And this is where we get into, from a forensics perspective, what's going to be next steps after. And we want to isolate that so that they don't encrypt again, and this is going to be networking. So we're blocking out those attackers. But at the same time, get to a point where we've cleaned the environment, and we can go to, if you are, to a insurance, that they can validate that you've taken the proper steps and ultimately get the environment back to restoration of production. Hit the next, please. So as we talked about before, as Rob led up to, we have safe mode is our concept. So this is a marketing term. A lot of vendors have marketing terms. With Pure, I like to say, the technology behind the marketing is what's important. So what we've done is architected our platforms for really high scale. We use snapshots all the time. And we've honestly been doing this before. We've been talking about ransomware the last couple of years. This feature was actually rolled out for a customer that did backup as a service about 4.5 years ago now. And what they wanted to protect against specifically was a rogue admin scenario. And that actually ends up being quite in common with the ransomware attack vector. It's not that they didn't trust their admins. They basically needed to, from a compliance perspective, guarantee that the data was not able to be deleted, by that admin. And that's what we've been focusing on. This is not a certification-driven feature. This is a real-world feature, and it's not only technical, but it's also a logical process. Rob mentioned how we involve our teams. We want to make sure that the actors are known, both in your environment, so that we can differentiate between the bad actors and the good actors. And then we have some recommendations as far as retention. We can go up to scale. You can kind of see here 400 days of retention. The highest customer I have is, I think, 192. But there is a trade-off, right? So the more data you're going to keep, this is still flash. The more data change there's happening, the more cost associated to it. So if anything, the right size in the environment for the right, right tool, right job, that's the concept we like to have a conversation with customers. So what's this look like? Next slide, please. We have this rolled into our Pure One portal. So this is management as a service, pure1.purestorage.com. Every customer has the ability to log in. Each one of these colors are different appliances. And basically, we're automatically fingerprinting and figuring out, protection level based on industry standards. Today is pretty finite as far as green, yellow, red. We're basically looking to be able to, have protection like snapshots, and then have the immutability, right? The protection of those snapshots being deleted. That's when we get into that green area. And then there's a whole lot of, and there's little, how we could see at the bottom right there, how we assess. There's ways that, we use that to flag. And we're looking to add granularity. This is a software as a service from management, comes with all Pure's products. And we're constantly iterating on this. Every now we log in, we get new features each week. Raise their categories based on how well protected they are. And then we also have granularity, and you can kind of see some of those things in the middle as far as different kinds of data. So we have, for example, file systems. Pure does offer file products now. a lot of we're not well known for it. since the beginning. The last 3 years, we've had a file, and now it's ubiquitous across our entire product line. So we're going to just start seeing more and more about unified access of data, and that's rolled into this platform. We want to protect all data, irregardless of how it's stored. So one of the new features that's been rolled out is this DRR anomaly detection. DRR means data reduction ratio. We take a agnostic way. Some vendors say dedupe, compression. This is overall. We use a lot of different things to shrink the data down as much as possible. And what we've done, and this is just rolled out recently, is basically look for aberrations, look for changes. We're baselining. You kind of see here in the middle. We're baselining the data, looking how it's accessed, and if we see any kinds of changes, we do a lot of work to make sure that those changes are, air quotes, real, real concern. So this is where Pure Support will take a look at it. We're not going to fire off a bajillion alarms to customers. We don't want, if anything, customers to see those alerts and then brush them off to the side. So that in conjunction, this kind of feature in conjunction with our support is rolled out, and 70% of Pure's cases are opened on behalf of customers by Pure Support, just as an example. Next, please. So after we've done the recovery, we've got that identification of when the encryption happened. We're going to do the snapshot restoration. We're going to try to restore as close to as possible as the attack. What's going to happen after? And this is where we talk about the authorities, either be the FBI, this could be your internal organizations, that could be insurance hired third party. There's a lot of individuals that are going to need to use this is, if anything, when you look at the costs of ransomware attacks, the people portion of the restoration is a significant portion. So if we can give that people layer better tools, now they can do their jobs more efficiently, get you back up and running quicker, and then also reduce that cost and that people cost to get that environment back up. So our arrays are not built for one function. Before I go on, our arrays are not built for one function. We can simultaneously run the bad environment and the good environment. The reality here is it's very likely that the production array will be taken, and that could be segmented on your premise. That could also be taken to another, like if we're talking the FBI. So having those snapshots in native format, well, now with this kind of concept, you can basically spin up your production, get back up and running, boot everything up, but at the same time have a duplicate environment for forensics so that you can have this staged recovery environment. And this is where you would have separate servers that now you're looking at the data. You might be spinning up multiple snapshots. It might be we've restored and the environment's now running on the original snapshot or the snapshot close to the attack, and now maybe we have 10 more snapshots. We need to look at that throughout the life cycle to say, well, this is what it touched on storage, but the attack may have branched out, and that could be multiple months. So we have this as far as a product, and then we have a couple different ways of acquiring it, especially on the OpEx side. There's the ability to pay for what you use and have that be the steady state, and then only get charged for what you burst up to afterwards. And we have a couple different ways with our Evergreen program with Flex, as well as Evergreen One. Next, please. So it's a real example. This is a hospital that will not be named, but I put this in because we all are people. We all worry about our health for ourselves as well as our loved ones, right? So when the ERP or when the EMR, electronic medical records, gets attacked, well, that's what's preventing now operations. So this was an attack that happened over the weekend at night. Reality timeline of events. The array is going to fill up. Pure is going to open up cases. In this case, the customer also called support, involved us. As part of this whole program, there's no requirement to involve Pure Support. These are snapshots. We are protecting them. You're setting them based on your policies and how long you want to protect the data. But you don't necessarily have to, call support to be able to use this feature. So a lot of times we get asked, can we provide references? Well, first off, if anyone has, been attacked, I'm sure don't know if you want to talk about it. So we try to respect our customers, but at the same time, they don't even have to contact us to be able to do this restoration. In this case, they did work with us. We were able to ship new arrays. We don't actually have an SLA focus. This is based on, Pure wants to treat our customers, try to be good. And if anything, not have to nickel and dime, not have to, get a PO before. So this is on the, the good portion of being a Pure. This is one of the reasons I came. They were able to take those snapshots replicated from production to that new array and effectively do that SRE, that stage recovery environment. And I think the restoration, I have the notes in there, was still in the 7 to 10 day portion, right? So there's this restoration of services is a big difference between I have a snapshot, I'm going to restore that versus I'm going to restore that, power everything on. There's a recommendation, if anyone has done red blue teams, walking through within your administration, within your environment to say, hey, what would happen, and basically have the different groups attend this as a preparation. What would happen if we got attacked logically? Like, who's going to make the call? Who's going to be in charge of, contacting the media? How do we deal with that employee that's going to be tweeting about it that someone else picks up on? There's a lot of things that you don't think about until you actively go through it. If anything, this customer is back up into going, but now they've tuned that process, and that's unfortunately the into the fire approach. Next, please. So last 2 slides for myself on how does this build out. Could be pretty, extensive. At the same time, each one of these columns, it does not have to be one, it doesn't have to be all in. This would be kind of a reference architecture for how you could tailor the maximum performance level. So we've got 2 data centers here on the left-hand side. We're doing our replication technology between them. We're either copying those natively, right? So those could be those snapshots going from this left hand to the middle. That could also be a backup provider. So that could be your Veeam, like that S1 in the middle could be just a simple Veeam repository. And then we get to, and this is typically, this would be a multi-site, very, especially when you get into electronic medical records, like companies like Epic recommendations. We've got the tertiary site. So these would be asynchronous. So we would be basically try to get the data from these 2 data centers on the left over to the middle as quick as possible. But then we can vary it from the ones in the second column to the third. So we're not necessarily replicating the attack as quick as possible. Maybe as a quick example, we're only replicating per hour or per day. That way, as the encryption kicks off, we're not replicating the encryption, basically. And then to Rob's point earlier, as far as the air gap, we see a lot of conversations around air gap, virtual air gap. There are ideas around, if we can separate out the data versus the management. And this is our agnostic term as far as like data bunker, the overall idea, what's your key assets and how do you put that outside of the blast radius? And that blast radius could be physically, right, in a separate location. It also could be logically, something as simple as, where that 4 number is, maybe that's a different set of firewalls that aren't that common to your existing environment, so that the team administering everything else in the environment, the credentials don't have access to that, that in between, kind of keep that drawbridge minimal as far as traffic. So just to recap on the last slide, what we talked over, we'll just skip one more. Is it updated me? There we go. Great. So we call this modern data protection. The idea here that we're shifting away from backups to restore. It really doesn't matter having backups if I can't restore it. And with the modern workloads, we're seeing restorations. Frankly, it's not acceptable to do day restores, to do multiple day restore times. That today means business going out of business. So the justification, and the reason for these tools is that we need to be able to respond quicker. I touched on a little bit before with the Pure One from the attack. We have our platforms and they can do high performance restores. They can also do that high performance analytics. So think things like Splunk, Elastic. It's the thing that might work perfectly fine on, let's say, non-flash, but when we're going through an attack, you're going to be scaling that up. You're going to be having, 10, 20, 30 people all querying these logs at once. That's really where the before is going to come in handy. And then overall in the during the attack and after the attack, this infrastructure has to be invisible. It has to be simple. We have to have the ability to be able to restore and not really think about that as a separate process from our day-to-days. Fun fact, Pure does not actually have a way, or the instructions of shutting down the array is to pull the power. So pull the two power cords. We're that confident that the data is going to persist. Like, that's the normal iteration. Same thing from the ransomware. These shouldn't be, in any attack really, these shouldn't be a task that now you go and now you find out when you go through that process. It should be, this is the steady state. These are tools that I use every day. And the last line of defense, just to close off, we are data company storage products. We are a portion of the puzzle, and we're not the only piece. This is a net concept. We want as many nets as possible so that you're going to stay safe. We're not the only net. So we talked about how do we combine this from the networking perspective? How do we include our compute? We have to protect all layers. And if anything, one of the things we want to say, we're a portion of what CCSI is talking about today as far as a total environment restoration, total environment protection. How did I do, Rob?
Sounds great, Rob. Appreciate it. That's really informative information, and thank you for that. We'd like to continue to talk about our CCSI managed security services, and we believe in people, process, and technology to implement any solution or complex concepts that we deliver to our customers. We have over 50 engineers on staff. We're 24/7, 365 monitoring. We've been in business for over 47 years, and we're SAN certified in SOC. And so we will fulfill your requirements based on a thorough discovery process, and then meet with you and partner with you very closely to deliver on this. And so we're happy to take your information and work with you very closely to do so. With that, we'd like to answer any questions. Kat, I'll turn it over to Kat Irizarry, who's collecting those questions, and we'll deliver responses for you.
So I have a few questions. First question we got in was, capturing and storing all these snapshots sounds expensive. How does Pure address cost?
That's a good question. Yeah. So all of our snapshots are very granular in that you only store the changes, and we're going to be looking at those changes. We're going to be compacting everything, deduplicating it. So there's the cost of the change, and then the minimizing it over the time. We're going to want to look at, we have multiple tiers. So for example, we have a conversation these days about your high performance tier, and that would be our X. And then especially for long durations, and I think I talked about this in the timeline, as our products can go up to, for example, 400 days, that doesn't necessarily mean that's economically viable. But the good news is we have a common operating system, we call it Purity, and we have the ability to take those snapshots, offload them to, for example, a lower tier. And we've got 3 tiers today. We've got our X, and that's our high performance tier. We technically have our XL, which is even higher performance, but from a flash perspective, the middle one, let's say warm, is our C, and that's QLC flash. So that's a lower performance tier. At the same time, we have customers, that's very viable for tier 2. And then their latest releases is really taking out disk. And the number thrown out there is 20 cents per gig on a 3-year basis. Those are the kind of levels when we start talking about, cheap and deep. We often think about flash for that high performance in the middle. We don't necessarily think about it for that disk, but we are actually there today. That is being sold. And if anything, you'll be starting to see that over the next year as a common sense. So to answer your question, minimizing the change and then tying it to the right tier from a performance and cost perspective.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Another question we got in was, will I have to change my backup software to take advantage of these functions from Pure?
So that's going to depend on the backup software, right? So the engineering me says that depends. But I think I mentioned like Veeam, for example, Commvault. What we've been doing is working with those backup vendors to have reference architectures, and then we have the ability to do it from not only block, so that would be like being able to take something like a fiber channel or iSCSI, LUN volume. We can do that now with file. I mentioned that we have file, and we can do that protection now, snapshotting the file system. And then we also have object. So object is quite often known for cheap and deep, like S3 in Amazon. We're S3 compliant, and that specifically works really well with Commvault. We're seeing a lot of customers leverage object, and object gives you the granularity of you're at the object level instead of having to snapshot everything. So you have the ability then to say, oh, I want to protect this high performance database or this tier one, database with one level. But maybe I want to do a different level of protection. Maybe I want to do 7 or 14 days with one set of data, do 2 or 3 days with another. We do recommend, minimally 3 days, just so that you have enough time to see the problem and then do the restoration. But most commonly, we have customers doing 7 and 14 days. So yeah, a lot of options out there. Oh, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we have specific integrations with Cohesity. We call it Flash Recover, and that is actually co-engineered. That's single entity. We have both vendors working together so that you're not calling one and pointing over at the other. This is a built together solution. It's called Flash Recover. Any others? I'm just checking the chat.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
Right.
How can an existing Pure customer get safe mode?
Yeah, so as of the latest version, so all you have to do is basically open a case and just basically tell us, how long you want to do the snapshots for. Like I said, 7 and 14 days is pretty common. And then we work with, you have to identify 2 individuals. If you think about this as like turning the keys in the missile silo, to be able to deviate from the protection scheme. So again, to be able to use these snapshots, no process change. You don't need to call Pure support. But let's say you wanted to, you had a protection, you snapshotted, 50 terabytes of data, and you're like, oops, or whatever, that was a mistake. We need to delete data. Well, how do we know whether or not, that's a legitimate admin or, an outside attacker? So you will do minimally, you'll have 2 individuals that are trusted individuals. They'll have what they know, with the PIN. They each have different pins. We track that. We have a different team within Pure that manages all of this, internal controls, so that setting this up has to be done by special group. And then to deviate from that, you would have to have those individuals call up to be able to do that restoration. But again, that's only that deviation, that's only be if you wanted to like disable safe mode or delete data. And then, the safe mode. I thought there was one other thing. Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. And then the last question we have is, we understand that Pure offers data protection recommendations based on an assessment. Does CCSI conduct data security risk assessments for clients?
Yes, I'll take that. So yeah, absolutely, and it's a great compliment for this overall implementation or any cybersecurity, information security control. We offer thorough risk assessments based on NIST CSF. We do NYDFS. We do other types of assessments with CIS, Center for Internet Security, Top 18, and so we customize the frameworks to meet your business needs and within your environments. And we partner very closely to understand your business, and we offer a thorough risk assessment for you.
That's a good point. That reminds me of what I was going to say. So with what Rob just said, we have tools to be able to estimate, how much will this, like especially if you're not snapshotting today, we can look at the individual volumes and say this is the space that's going to be required, based on the snapshot policy that you put in. with what Rob said, you then have to take that and say, well, what are the right volumes? What are the volumes that map to my just security requirements? And then how does that fit into the total restoration effort? So it's about, like I said before, giving good tools so that we can solve the right problems as quickly as possible. And that's just one example of what Pure offers and how it integrates with what Rob just said that CCSI provides.
That's
Thank
all
you,
the
Rob Q.
questions.
Thank you, Rob Q, Rob V, and also Kat. That was very informative. To all the attendees, want to thank you for your time today. Your account managers will be following up to discuss next steps. And any questions at any time, please feel free to contact myself or Rob Villano. And again, a reminder, a survey will be sent to everyone, and we really appreciate your feedback. It helps us planning more of these events in the future. Let us know topics you're interested in, anything security related, anything storage related. We really, again, appreciate the feedback and would consider these events moving forward. So this concludes today's event. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.